Most networking advice is either sleazy or straight up useless. So I built the ultimate list based on what actually built Europe's biggest business meetup group. I'm Patrick Powers, and this video is the most comprehensive list of business networking tips on YouTube. And this stuff flat out works. I know, because I used it to build the second biggest business meetup group in the world with almost 30,000 members. It was a system, a repeatable set of strategies that built relationships without the cringe. And in this video, I'm giving you all of it, from the beginner moves to the power connector plays. Some of the stuff you might know, but I guarantee you some of it is the stuff that only 1% of the top business networkers in the world know. So let's get started. Okay, so networking tip number one is to show up early. And this is actually really important for several reasons. Number one, for most people, it's a quite nerve-wracking experience to go to a networking event. So when you arrive early, it gives you time to kind of relax a little bit more. But very importantly, it gives you a chance to connect with the organizers or the owners of that group. Because later on, believe me, everybody will want to talk to them, so you kind of missed your chance to really stand out. If you arrive early, and I'm not talking about 5 minutes early, you need to be there 20 minutes early, 30 minutes early. You'll be able to make an impact on the organizers and create a connection with them so they'll remember you forever. And this leads us to business networking tip number two, which is to be helpful to the organizers. Get to a networking event with the intent of being helpful to the organizers, because those are the people that can open up doors and make introductions to everybody else in the group. You know, I know from running hundreds of networking events, it can be quite stressful, and especially last minute, and just having an extra hand to kind of move chairs around or just doing some stuff can actually be really, really helpful. So ask the organizers if you can help in any way, but here's a very important distinction. If they seem kind of too overwhelmed and stressed out and say, no, that's okay, don't try to force them to talk to you, because I've experienced that before, that somebody will get into an event and I'm right in the middle of getting the screen ready, organizing things for the speaker and like tons of stuff. And somebody will come in and they really want to get to know me, and they just keep on talking like, how long have you been running the group and blah, 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 and all kinds of stuff. That can really add to the stress of the organizer. So don't try to force your connection on them. Just offer your help, and if they don't want it, just step back. Okay, business networking tip number three, and this is a big one for a lot of people, and that is how to move away from a conversation gracefully. You know, it's a common situation that you'll be kind of stuck in a conversation and it's going on and it's going on and on too long, and you want to move on to talk to somebody else at the event. So what do you do without kind of offending the other person and without it being awkward? Now, before I go into the actual techniques, I want to tell you one very important thing here about the philosophy of moving on. You are not there to provide emotional support for that person. So what I'm saying here is, like, if you want to move on, it's not your problem if they kind of feel hurt by that. Now, we want to be helpful to people. That's really one of the most foundational philosophies of networking, but we're not there just to make sure that they feel not hurt. Okay, so if you want to move on, make the decision to move on and don't judge yourself by it. Don't feel obligated to stay in that conversation just because they want to, right? Having said that, let's look at 3 ways to move on gracefully without it being too awkward. Number one, introduce them to somebody there at the event. If you know anybody else at the event, saying, hey, you know what, I think you'll be really glad to meet this person because, and then give them a reason. Or you can just simply say, hey, I think you would really like to meet this person. Let me introduce you to Bob or Alice, or whatever it is. And then you introduce them and you simply move on, saying, hey, let me go and meet some more people. Number 2, if you don't know anyone at the event that you can introduce them to, ask them if they have somebody that they can introduce you to. And number 3, say, look, it's been so fantastic to meet you, and I would love to stay connected. And then you take out your phone and you basically signal that, hey, this is the time where we exchange contact information and start thinking about moving on to go and meet some other amazing people. And so again, you take out your phone and say, where can I find you on social media? My best place is LinkedIn or whatever it is. Are you on LinkedIn? Are you there? Get that contact information. And then one very powerful thing is to find some ways that you can lift them up and make them feel great about themselves, not about you. Don't have the focus on you, have the focus on them. So say something like, I really enjoyed us talking. I'm so glad that we met. And I really admire you because this, or this. See, this leaves the conversation on a very high note, and there's practically no chance of it being awkward. Tip number 4, and this has been absolutely life-changing for me, and that is to start your own networking group. Now, when I started my group on meetup.com and I was Entrepreneurs in London, it grew to the second biggest business meetup group in the world. And it's changed my life in so many ways. So it can be super powerful because as the hub, as the center and the core of that group, you got to be the most influential person in that group. And people will automatically assume that you are a leader and an expert at what you do. Now, I wouldn't recommend necessarily that you start doing this if you've never really done any networking. But if you already are quite experienced networker, this can be super powerful. Now, if you want to avoid all the mistakes that I did, I recommend you go and check out my training program, Magnetic Tribes. You'll find more information about it at patrickmpowers.com/magnetic tribes. Let's move on to number 5. And that is to maintain good eye contact. I believe that it's actually more important to have good eye contact than it is to smile. Lots of people are saying, you must be smiling. Well, it might not really be in your personality to do that. But solid eye contact is extremely important because if you don't maintain good eye contact, what you are basically sending out a signal is one of two things, is that I don't really like you, or I'm not comfortable with you, or I'm not comfortable with myself. Because people that have low self-confidence, they often have a hard time maintaining good eye contact. If this is a big problem for you, I highly recommend you make this a priority and actually try to practice maintaining eye contact so long that it's really uncomfortable for you. And then every single day, stretch it a little bit further and a little bit further. One of the best ways to do this is with a friend. Simply ask a friend to sit and stare in your eyes for 1 or 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I recommend you do it at least 1 minute and set an alarm so you don't kind of look away to look at the time to see how long you've done it. Business networking tip number 6, listen like a pro. Now, listening really is one of the most transformational skills you've ever learned. Now, why is it so powerful? Now, first of all, think about, who do you like the most? Somebody who talks all the time or somebody who's a really good listener? With the right listening skills, you'll be able to connect and create trust with people incredibly fast. But also listening to people will give you tons of information about them that you can use to connect even further and to position yourself and your offers. I highly recommend you get some training on this. I actually took a 3-day training once in Florida just on listening skills, and it literally changed my ability to connect with people and get to that level where I can make more deals. Now, we go into 10 different areas of listening in my advanced training, but if there's just one thing you should remember about listening, is to listen without judgment and listen with the only purpose of understanding this person and their world. Not to pitch, not to find things to say that makes you sound great or interesting, but simply with the purpose of understanding that person. That alone could set you apart. Okay, let's move on to business networking tip number 7, and this is a biggie. Ask what people do before they ask you. Now, this is more important than you would imagine, so allow me to explain. You see, the thing is, if they ask first, they're actually not really listening to you. And here's why. Again, people are so scared of going to networking events. And if they ask you first and you're telling them about what you're doing, they are not listening to you because they are rehearsing their pitch, what to say in their mind while they are trying to listen to you. So they're not really truly listening to you. So you need to ask them first so they can get their pitch or talk out of the way. But this also gives you information about them that you can use to tailor your next step, what you're going to be talking about. But also, again, once they have told their thing and it's your time to talk about what you do, then they'll listen to you much more intently. They'll be much more present. This is one of the most important strategic moves in networking. Ask them first. Business networking tip number 8, work the room. And what that means is that you don't stay with the same person or few people for too long, but you move around and get to talk to a good amount of people. Now, here's a couple tips around that. Like, first of all, I know how it feels kind of safe if you've gotten into a conversation and it's a really good conversation, and it can feel a bit scary or unsafe getting outside of your comfort zone to move on to the next one, because this has been such a great conversation, right? But you have to be a little bit selfish with your time and make sure that you work the room to get a few good contexts. Now, what I recommend is that before you go to the event, that you set a limit to how many people you minimum should talk to. I typically set that limit to approximately 5 to 7, depending on the length of the event. You definitely shouldn't go around to talk to like 15 or 20 people, because then you also don't have enough time to really properly connect with people and make sure that they will remember you. If you just run around and quickly talk to everyone, you'll also just appear like kind of a crazy person. But whatever number you set the number and then make sure you stick to it, commit to that number. Because if you don't, it is all too easy to stick to that nice person you're having a good conversation with for far too long. Business networking tip number 9, and that is to connect with them everywhere. And what I mean is connect with them on as many platforms as humanly possible. Because the more places they see you, the more they will think that you are really somebody to follow. And of course, obviously, they'll be reminded of you more times and more places, and that can only be a good thing. So don't just stick to your own favorite platform, because if you love LinkedIn, well, somebody else might love Instagram better or Facebook better. You know, even though my obvious market is on LinkedIn, for many years, Facebook was my favorite social media home. And I built a great presence there. I was almost never on LinkedIn. Now, these days, I'm definitely moving more and more towards LinkedIn and actually kind of a little bit away from Facebook. But my point is, don't just connect with them on your favorite platform. Business networking tip number 10, and that is to use their name. And now you might think that you are really bad at remembering people's names, but there are cures to that. Trust me. I used to teach memorization techniques, and I actually was able to remember practically all our members by name and face up till we had about 2,200 people. At that time, it started growing so fast that it just became too much work for me to memorize it. But the power of people's names are absolutely amazing. People love it when you remember the names. One of the things that I did that blew people away every single time is that somebody that hadn't been to our event before, I would take the time to memorize their face and their name. So when they came to the event, I was able to say, "Hey, John, so great to meet you." Right? And they would be like, "Oh my God, like, how do you know my name?" Now, these days, there actually might be tech that makes this more easy, but back then, it was like people were completely blown away. So put some effort into remembering people's names. And the reason why you are not good at remembering people's names is probably not because, or absolutely almost certainly not because there's something wrong with your memory. Not at all. One of the reasons is actually one of the things we talked about on a previous tip, and that is you haven't practiced your pitch enough. So at the time that you talk to people, you're too focused on trying to think, what am I going to say next? How am I going to appear? So when you practice your pitch well enough, you don't have to think about it. You can focus more on listening to people's name and remembering it. But here is a very quick tip on how it becomes easier to remember people's names. And that is simply at the time where they say their name, say it back immediately 2 times. So they say, "Hi, my name is John." You say, "John, I'm Patrick. So great to meet you." So John, tell me what you do, right? So you said it 2 times. And I recommend actually in that first conversation, say it a couple more times. The more times you say it, and at the time you say it, focus on their face, the easier it is for you to remember it. And also make sure that as soon as you leave the networking event, that you go through all the people that you talk to, go through them on social media, and maybe even make a couple notes about them, but definitely go through their social media, see their faces again, see something about them that helps you hook their name and their face in your mind. Trust me, that extra time that it takes to do that is so worth it. Business networking tip number 11, and I'm so excited about this. This is one of my biggest things, and that's to ask deeper questions, what I call transformational questions. Most people ask surface level transactional questions, questions that are extremely easy to answer and requires no thought at all. Like, how are you doing? People don't even think about it. They're not really honest about it, because if they're honest, in a lot of cases, they would be probably saying, yeah, you know what? It's a bit of a struggle at the moment, or I'm not really doing that well, or that's just the reality that most people are kind of struggling. So if you just ask them the same surface level questions everybody else is, you're not going to stand out, and you're not going to have any material for a great conversation that they will remember you fondly from. We need to dig a little bit deeper. So let me just give you a couple of examples. Lots of the time that people was meeting me at my events, they would simply be asking, oh, so how was your week? And you say, yeah, it was great. Again, where do you go in the conversation from that? You don't know. But how about if you simply change this little one thing to ask them, so what was the best part of your week so far? Now, just this little change, it forces them to go and review everything that happened this week and think about the best thing that happened. And what this does, that first of all, they go deeper, and in that moment, they get out of the autopilot they're on, because everybody is on autopilot. One of your most important missions, if you will, in networking is to get people off their autopilot as quickly as possible so you can really start the connection process, right? So get them off the autopilot, ask a deeper questions like how or what was the best part of your week? Now, let's say they said, I went to a handball game with my daughter. Now, first of all, they will light up when they talk about this, and it also gives you material to talk deeper. And maybe you love handball. Maybe you have some experience around that you can then start talking about. Maybe they will say, well, I went on a fishing trip and I caught a really big pike. Like, maybe you love fishing. Like, by the way, I love fishing. So if anybody brought that up, it's like, boom, we're just friends immediately, right? It almost feels like you're just like your fishing buddy, and you have this shared passion. So when you ask questions that goes much deeper, the conversation becomes so much more powerful and memorable. And that should be some of your main purposes of a conversation and networking, is to, 1, make an impact, and 2, be remembered. Now, if you want to learn more of these transformational questions, I prepared a list of 36 questions that work extremely well. I call it the Patrick Powers 36, and you can find the link in the description. Business networking tip number 12, and this is one of my new favorite ones, and that is to take a selfie with every single person you meet at an event, and then you send it to them afterwards. Now, this does several things. Like, first of all, it stands out because almost nobody is doing it. It's very personal. And you can even share a picture on social media. And if you do that, like if you share it on LinkedIn, hey, look, I was hanging out with Andrew or whatever, they feel really honored. And trust me, they will remember you so much better. And when they go to that messenger that you sent them on and you see that picture, they will remember your face again by seeing it. Trust me, this really works. And in fact, I want to recommend that you send that picture to them on WhatsApp or Telegram, because those channels are more personal. And it'll allow you to separate yourself from all the noise on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. Trust me, this is one of the most powerful things you can do. And in fact, I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing it sooner. Business networking tip number 13. Speak up about 60 to 70% of people that go to a networking event, they actually speak with too low volume. And what do we associate with people that speak very softly and with low volume? Not very confident. Can you speak with too high volume? Absolutely. But I think I've met maybe 2 or 3 people that actually spoke with too high volume. And especially when we talk about networking events that are quite noisy. So how much higher? Well, in general, I think approximately 25 to 30% higher, and in some cases even 50. But what I would recommend is that you make a test with some of your friends and don't just use one friend, okay? Take 3 or 4 friends and then you do a test with them and simply ask, is the level I'm speaking with you right now appropriate? Or do I need to increase it to become even better? And then simply speak to them at a slightly higher level and ask them to measure it and give you feedback. But trust me, especially when you go to networking events, you want to speak typically with a high volume. And just by doing that, by the way, here's something I do in my speaking classes. When we get people to speak with really, really high volume, but what happens is that you automatically feel more confident. It's really interesting how when you use body language and speak like somebody who's confident, you automatically be more confident. If this is a big issue for you, you might want to actually practice this from home before it's actually speaking with a high volume. Business networking tip number 14, and it is to pay attention. And what I mean by that is really pay attention to their body language. I have seen many times people that are boring people to death and they're not doing something about it. Like, I can clearly see that this other person in the conversation is totally bored. Other situations where somebody is leaning way too close into people's personal space and they're kind of leaning away. Of course, that's very uncomfortable if somebody's going too close into your personal space that you don't know that well yet. And again, as we talked about in an earlier tip, sometimes people could speak too softly, and that you can see that often with people are just leaning in very, very close to you to try to hear it. So just pay attention to people's body language. It's especially hard maybe to detect when people are bored, and it's very important because 2 things, if people are bored with you, 1, shift gears, let them talk, ask questions of them to get them to talk, or change gears in terms of your energy or story, or relatively quickly move on to talk to somebody else. But there's an absolute gold mine to be discovered in noticing people's body language. So make sure you pay attention. Business networking tip number 15, get to know their dreams and their goals. Like, something magical happens when people talk about their bigger dreams and goals. There's just a connection that is happening almost automatically and effortlessly. And also, very importantly, of course, the more you know about what they want, the easier it is for you to help them get it. And maybe that there is a match between what you do as a business or in your career, and you can actually sell something to them simply because you found out what it is they actually want. Now, of course, there are many ways you can do that, but just one of the questions that I really like is, if we were to meet in 1 year from now with a bottle of champagne, what would we be celebrating? See, this put a future vision into their head. It gets them to reveal something that is really, truly important to them. Business networking tip number 16, and that is to be different. We talked about it before. If you're not different, nobody will notice you. You're going to blend into the background. Now, almost everybody hates being different. We simply, by default, typically don't like to stand out. It feels more safe to be kind of part of the wider group. But the problem is, they will not notice you, and they will certainly not remember you. There are many ways to stand out. Ask deeper questions like we talked about. Have an above average handshake. Have an above average energy. Maybe you dress in a different way. Be above average helpful. But whatever you do, you just have to stand out. Business networking tip number 17, sound and look alive. What do I mean by that? To be honest, most people, when you go to an event, their energy, and I'm not talking about caffeine kind of energy, just like the overall body language, their tonality, People are attracted to people that have a good energy, that like themselves, that they're confident in themselves. But trust me when I say this, most people, they sound and they look alike. They are depressed or borderline suicidal. Now, one of the things that I recommend that you do is that listen to your own voicemail. Also, maybe even go on video and record an introduction and then watch it back and be very honest in your assessment of yourself. And maybe it's pretty good, but always think about how could you become even better? And trust me, when I started networking in the beginning, I was absolutely horrible. And when I saw myself on video, I was just in shock about how bad I was. See, it's a really weird thing that we're extremely bad at assessing how we appear to other people, observing from ourselves. But once we listen to ourselves from the outside and hear ourselves from the outside, we can actually see ourselves much more honest and accurately. But this is one of the most important areas to work on, is to work on your energy, how you immediately appear, because people will judge you just like that instantly based on your energy. And the most important energy to project is that, hey, I like you and I like myself. Business networking tip number 18, and that is to be in the moment. There's so many people that, one, they haven't rehearsed their pitch well enough when you go to an event or you just meet someone. So they're not really present. They're thinking about what to say next or how to say their pitch. Also, many times people are simply thinking about, how can I impress this person? Like, what can I say next that is interesting? Forget all about that. Simply be in the moment. It's a very, very powerful and attractive presence around people that actually truly are in the moment. And when you're truly in the present moment, it sends a signal to people that what they're saying is really important to you. So the best way to describe being in the moment is almost like when you're in love. It's like everything else disappears around you. You're not thinking about anything else other than the person you are talking to. If you can train yourself to be like that, you will almost invariably be a people magnet. Business networking tip number 19, and that is to use old-fashioned business cards. I actually highly recommend to do that because it's just an extra edge, an extra way for people to remember you. And they're actually more powerful these days than they ever have been because very, very few people are using them. And therefore, it really gives you a chance to stand out. And of course, absolutely remember to put your face on the business card. It's one of the most important things. People obsess about the text and the message, and then forget to put the face on. And I guarantee you, in most cases, especially if people met you at a relatively big event, 2 hours or 2 days later, they're not going to remember you and your face. I'm sorry to tell you. And so if you put your face on the business cards, that gives them that extra way to remember you. And it is scientifically proven that the more time people have seen a picture of someone, the more they will trust them. Business networking tip number 20, and that is to ask people's opinions. Now, I can't believe how powerful this is. And this is only something that I've done for a relatively short amount of time. Apparently, this was one of Bill Clinton's big secrets, that he would ask everybody of their opinions. I don't know really why this is so powerful. I guess it really appeals to people's ego that you would ask their opinion about something. But for whatever reason, it just really works. Business networking tip number 21, and that is to don't be clingy. So remember that clingy kid back in school that nobody liked, right? Nobody likes clingy people. And I know that if you get into a conversation with people in an event, it can be a little bit scary to move on and talk to somebody else. But nobody likes that clingy person, so don't be that person. And how can you find out maybe if you're clingy? Well, first of all, maybe set a timer to like 10 to 15 minutes, then you will decide to move on. But also another way that you can find out is if people kind of get antsy and they look like with a body language that they kind of want to move on or that they are even bored, that's the time to end that conversation and move on to somebody else. Business networking tip number 22, and that is to be a connector. Now, this is one of the most powerful things you can do, is to connect people with each other that don't know each other. But very importantly here, lots of people will do this because they've heard that connecting people is super powerful, because what happens is, if you do it the right way, you'll create goodwill for two people and they will remember you for this. But here's the problem. Here's the error that most people, not necessarily most, but a lot of people are doing, is that they're not thinking about whether those two people are actually relevant for each other and can provide value both ways. I've had lots of people that reached out and say, hey, Patrick, I wanted to connect with this person. And it's like, okay. And I'm thinking, why? And this is especially important if you want to connect people that are influential, successful, they have a big network, because they're busy and they will have lots of people that actually will reach out to them to try to connect them with other people. So in that case, when you have tons of those things happening, you don't just want to connect with everyone. You want to make sure that it's relevant and it can be worth your while. So one of the greatest things that you can do is, when you connect people, is to tell them why you're doing it. Saying, Bob, I would love you to meet Alice because Alice is this, and I think that could be interesting for you. And Bob, would be great for you to meet Alice because this, right? So always provide that context. And what also this does is that it makes it so much easier for those two people to start a conversation, because you have provided some context. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit like, well, who is this person? Why am I talking to you? And what should I say to get the conversation going? But if you do this the right way, it's one of the most powerful things you can do. Business networking tip number 23, and this is super powerful, and that is to greet people like they're your best friend. Now, I don't necessarily mean that 100% literally. If you are a super hugger, for example, and you're meeting people, like you just want to hug them right away, that could weird people out. However, there's something really powerful about raising your energy towards how you would greet people when they're your best friend. Especially if it's like a best friend you haven't seen for years. Think about that for a moment. How would you greet that really super friend that you haven't seen? Maybe they've been traveling to a different part of the world and you're seeing them for the first time for 3, 4, 5 years. How would you greet them? There's an energy, there's a joy in seeing them. And if you project that joy of seeing somebody else, I guarantee you're going to break through several layers of the defensiveness that people typically have when they meet a stranger. Now, this has been one of the hallmarks of how me and the crew, we act at Entrepreneurs in London events. We just assume that everybody is a friend and we meet them like they are. Maybe this sounds a little bit crazy to you, but I can guarantee you it is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Tip number 24, how to be a great conversationalist. Now, to be a great networker, you have to be a good conversationalist. So there are obviously lots of things you can do, and in our advanced training, we go deeper into this. But here are just 4 things you can do to make yourself a better conversationalist. Number 1, be fascinated. I learned from one of the greatest marketing geniuses on the planet, Jay Abraham, that be interested instead of trying to be interesting. Most people are trying to be interesting. If you simply are interested, people will trust you so much faster. But I want to take it to the next level and to go from not just interest, but fascination. Like, be fascinated with that other person. And I guarantee you, they'll feel honored, they'll feel important and special. Number 2, let them talk way more than you do. I know it can be frustrating. There's things that you really want to say, but think about, what is your purpose of talking to someone? Well, typically there's something that we'd like to have from this person, just having them as a connection that maybe can open up doors. Now, to achieve that goal the fastest, we need to make them remember us. And I guarantee you'll do that much more effectively by letting them talk than you talking. Number 3, ask deep questions that make them think. And be bold, go deep, go beyond what everybody else does. And by the way, look in the description of this video and you'll find a link to Patrick Powers 36, the 36 questions that I've tested works incredibly well and is way beyond what everybody else is doing. Number 4, praise them. Make them feel important, special, smart, valued. People rarely have anyone, even in their closest family, make them feel valued and special. So when you do it, you stand out to them as somebody who is very, very attractive and that they will want to hang around because you make them feel great about themselves. Business networking tip number 26, follow up quickly. And I cannot stress how important this is. You should be following up with people within 24 hours of meeting them and maximum 48 hours, because otherwise they simply will kind of forget about you. If you don't follow up with people after networking events, all your efforts is kind of wasted because you're not going to be remembered just from meeting that person one time. And they're certainly not going to be wanting to do business with you or really do anything, because networking is a game of trust, and they're just not going to trust you after meeting you once. People are so busy today and they're inundated with marketing messages that you're just not going to stay in their memory for very long unless you make sure that you are there in their memory. And so the quicker you follow it up, even within the first few hours, can make a huge difference. And this brings us to business networking tip number 27, which is to follow up often. Again, you will simply be forgotten if you don't follow up often. And most people, they follow up in a horrible way where they're actually more or less trying to make a sale. That is not networking. That is an attempt of selling. And especially in the initial phases where you don't have a strong relationship with them, that is going to fall flat on its face and will be counterproductive. So follow up in a way that provides value and build that trust, because we only buy from people that we like and trust. Business networking tip number 28, and that's to have a benefit-oriented pitch. Your pitch is one of the most important things to get right when networking. To make an effective pitch, you need to have at least one juicy benefit-oriented statement. So when people ask, so what do you do? Most people answer something like, well, I'm an accountant or I'm a marketer. Again, how do you stand out by saying that? You don't. You blend into the background. And also, there's nothing that people could be interested in. They can't be interested in accountant. You have to tell them how you benefit your clients. In other words, the results of what you do. For example, I help busy moms organize their life and reduce stress. Or I help busy moms organize their life and get their time back. Here's one that I used to use. I create sales funnels that get more leads without increasing marketing costs. How about if you're an accountant? I help small businesses save 9% on their taxes with tactics almost nobody understands. So basically what you're doing here in the pitch is you want to throw out a couple of benefits like baits, like fishing, just to see if they bite. Business networking tip number 29, and this is only applicable if there's a speaker at the event, but if there is, oh my God, this could be so powerful. Now, what you want to do is you reach out to the speaker beforehand. And by doing what I'm about to share with you, you'll separate yourself from everybody there. And don't forget, the speaker could be a very, very powerful link. Obviously, they'll be typically more influential than the rest of the people there. And the thing is, once the speaker has done their talk, everybody wants to talk to them. So you will rarely get a chance to really connect with them. Like if you're lucky, you'll get a few seconds or a minute, but you're going to be competing with everybody else there. So you're not going to stand out. So to stand out and make yourself invaluable to them, reach out beforehand, and you're going to do a couple of things. First of all, you simply let them know, hey, I see that you are a speaker coming to the event, and I really look forward to hear you talk, and give them a reason. Don't just say, oh, I look forward to hear you talk. Tell them why you're interested in the subject. And number 2, offer them to help. And simply by offering help, you stand out from the rest of the crowd, and they will definitely remember you. But here is a super, super duper powerful trick. Okay. So Many times there will be a Q&A at the end of their talk. And this actually happens a lot of times with smaller groups of up to, say, 30 to 40 people. Like if there's 60, 70, 80, or 100 people in the room, maybe not so much, but it could still happen. That when the speaker opens up and say, okay, any questions? Then there's crickets in the room, because everybody is afraid of being the first person to ask a question. People are afraid of sounding stupid. People are afraid of sounding that they don't get it. So this could be a very awkward moment for the speaker and the whole room, because it kind of sounds like that people are just not interested in what the speaker have to say. So here is how to help the speaker avoid this situation, and you will come out like a superhero to them. Simply let them know. Okay, you say this. Listen, I know if you have a Q&A at the end of the talk, that sometimes in smaller groups, it can be a little bit awkward moment of silence that nobody wants to speak. I would love to offer to be that first person to ask a question, because see, here's what happens. Once the first person asks questions, that everybody else feels, oh, now it's okay. And the speaker knows this, guaranteed, they've experienced this. And if they say, yeah, that sounds great, simply ask them, is there a favorite question that you would like me to ask? And if you do this, I guarantee you, they will totally love you for it. And then if you combine that with one of the previous tips we talked about in showing up early, I guarantee you that speaker will love talking to you before everybody else arrives, and you will get that time, and they will never, ever forget you. I guarantee you. Business networking tip number 30, leave them feeling better. If you do this, I guarantee you, you will be remembered. People don't really remember what we said or even did, but they will remember how you made them feel. So for example, find something that can increase their self-esteem. Making compliments are good, but they're not that powerful because lots of people use them. Now, I typically try to dig a little bit deeper and try to find something about their character traits. And then I recognize them for that. And people totally love this, because the character traits is something that's deeply personal about them. Now, one of the questions that I use to kind of dig this out is to ask them, what is their superpower? Also, I look for their hidden potential that they might not be even using or not using enough. And tell them about the great future that you see for them in that potential. You see, when you do this, people will feel better about themselves. And because you are the trigger of that feeling, they will remember you for it, and they will want more from you. Trust me, they will want to hang out with you. Networking tip number 31, and oh my God, this is one of my favorites, and I call it pre-networking. When you do this, you will be almost without competition in that networking event. Because when people arrive at a networking event, it's quite scary and they don't know who to talk to. And again, like, oh, there's a group of people over there. How do I break into that? Is it appropriate? Is it not appropriate? And people just feel awkward. Okay, so how to fix this situation is when you reach out to people beforehand and do a little bit of networking online. So at the moment they see you at the event, you are not going to be a stranger, at least not a complete stranger, and they will gravitate towards you. I guarantee you, in that sea of people, and they see you, that nice person that took time to reach out to them and get to know them a little bit, you will be above everybody else in that room, I guarantee you. So go through the list of people registered for the event and then find them on social media. Now, you might not be able to find everyone, and that's fine. And also, some of the events are not listing the attendees. And so what do you do in that situation? You can at least do that with the organizers, which again are some of the most important people to connect with at that event. Again, imagine walking into that event and the organizer already kind of know you a little bit and are thinking about you in a fun way. I mean, that is super powerful. Business networking tip number 32, and that is to use audio messages. I've said it many times before, networking is really a game of trust, and you need to stand out, be noticed. And audio messages are one of those ways, and they're super powerful. One, because they stand out, and two, because There's magic in people's voices. You probably heard this study many times before that only 7% of a message is carried in the words, 38% in the voice, and 55% in the body language. So by using voice messages, you're outcompeting everybody else that is only using text messages. Business networking tip number 33, which goes hand in hand with the audio messages we just talked about, and that is to use video messages. And this is mega powerful. Every single year on my birthday, I know I will get a video message from one person. It's a host of a podcast that I was a guest on, and he sends me a happy birthday song, and it's personalized for me. And he's horrible at singing, but it feels amazing that he took that time to sing me a personal birthday message. Now, in terms of the birthday message, I actually would not do that unless you know people a little bit, because it can be a little bit weird to get something that personal from somebody that you practically don't know. But in general, just a video message saying, hey, great to meet you the other day, and I'll be keeping my eyes open for anyone looking for their type of service, or something like that. Business networking tip number 34, and that is to manage your expectations. You know, early when I was doing networking, I had a big problem in comparing myself to people that were much better than myself and getting way better results. And because of that, I often felt that there was something wrong with me, or I was just horrible at this game. But there's two very important things to keep in mind here. One, these people had been in the game way longer than me. They had developed stronger skills and more confidence. And number two, often they had been developing relationships and trust with these connections over a long time. So obviously it's going to be easier for them to close more business. Now, I would beat myself up if I wasn't profitable in a couple of weeks or didn't close any deals. Like, if you're a real pro, you could get some deals very quickly, but it happens relatively rarely. So don't beat yourself up for not getting results right away. Take your time to learn the networking game properly, and then take your time to build the relationships to a level where then business suddenly just flows naturally. And then you will be one of those people that other people look at with admiration and thinking like, wow, how are they doing this? Business networking tip number 35, ask to be introduced. This is a powerful way to quickly expand your network. And the thing is, when you're being introduced to someone, there's an implied trust from the person introducing you to them. So therefore, you borrow a little bit of trust from that relationship that has already been established. And if you're at an event, it's also much easier to get a conversation going when you're being introduced to someone. So simply ask something like, hey, is there anyone that I should really know at this event? I would really love to have an introduction. And by the way, that is also a way to exit a conversation you want to move on from in a way that is not awkward. All right, let's continue. Business networking tip number 36, and that is to be super helpful. I have this philosophy I called being aggressively friendly, because I'll tell you what, if you're really helpful to people, you become very, very hard to resist. So look for ways that you can be of value to people, even if it's not directly related to what you do as a business or in your career. And I guarantee you, people will remember you for it, and they'll feel a little bit in debt to you because you helped them. And because of that, they might open very, very valuable doors for you. Business networking tip number 37, that is to find and shine a light on people's greatness. See, most people try to pitch, but think about if someone said this to you: I can see that you have an amazing potential in this specific area, and you're not even using that potential to your full capacity. How would you feel about that? You would probably really appreciate. And a very important point here is to not be generic about it, but find something specific. Don't just say, yeah, you're really great at what you do and you could do better. The more specific you go in detail about this, the more powerful it becomes. So go out of your way to be a good finder. You cannot believe how powerful this is. Truly one of the greatest secrets to success with people. Business networking tip number 38, and that is to treat everyone as equals. The interesting thing is that almost everyone actually want to be treated as equals. So unless people are complete egomaniacs, if you meet someone with way higher status than you, treat them as equals. If you meet with somebody lower status than you, treat them as equals. If you're treating someone with much lower status than yourself as your equal, I guarantee you they will remember you for it. And when you meet somebody with higher status, don't treat them like they're gurus or put them on a pedestal. Treat them as equals. I guarantee you they will really respect you for that. Think about if you were like some kind of a crazy fanboy, how are they going to look at you? They're not going to respect you for that. So basically, treat everyone like they're gold because they are. And never ever forget that you have something valuable to bring to the table, no matter who they are. If nothing else, just being a human being and being there and listening to them, that is bringing value to the table. Business networking tip number 39. And this one is really interesting. And it's about how to stay engaged in a conversation when someone is boring. We've all experienced this from time to time, to meet someone who is boring. So of course you have two choices. You could move on or you could keep listening to them. Now, what I find is sometimes I just choose to move on if I'm at a networking event. It depends on the situation and my feeling, but you could also do something really interesting. You could take responsibility to make that conversation inspiring and interesting, even fascinating. I simply choose to unlock their interesting part of themselves. You see, because the thing is, many times, if we ask interesting and deep questions, people will open up and reveal things about themselves that can be really, really interesting. If you just ask surface level questions, well, that doesn't give people a chance to open up. Maybe they're not comfortable opening up. Maybe they don't feel creative. But if you ask really deep, probing and interesting questions, then that gives them a chance to show them who they really are. So many times I choose to be fascinated and to believe that that person has something really valuable, something really interesting about them. And typically, if I come from that perspective and I keep on digging, I will find that interesting part of people. So let's move on. Business networking tip number 40. And that's to come back to the same networking group often. I see this mistake made so many times that people go to a networking event, they didn't close any business or they didn't get what they came for. Then they move on to a different group and then nothing happens with that group as well. And then they move on to a third group and so on and so on. That is a recipe for failure in networking because it is not about meeting people once and then just everything just clicks. They like you, they trust you, and then start buying from you or do whatever it is that you want them to do. That's just not how networking works. It's about creating relationship, creating trust, and trust takes time. So what I say is, the second time you meet someone, they will recognize you. And the third time you meet someone is when they'll really start to trust you. Now, of course, that depends also on the length of the meetings, but that's just a good rule of thumb. So if you keep on hopping around from networking group to networking group, you're just never going to develop that kind of trust that it takes. But if you come back like the third and the fourth time, I guarantee you the organizers are going to start to notice you because you'll have done what most people don't. Networking is only won by the people who play the long game. And I guarantee you it's worth it because the benefits of having a strong network is just incomparable. Business networking tip number 41, target the leaders. Now, if you don't approach networking the right way, it can be a huge time waster. And one of the ways that you can maximize your time is to find the leaders in a group. Now, obviously, the organizers are relatively easy to find, but who are the kind of unannounced leaders in a group? Well, if you know what to look for, they're actually not that hard to find. Now, there are two ways you can do it. First of all, you can simply ask. Ask the organizers, for example, who are the most influential people in this group? And when they say, oh, it's Chris over there, and just simply say, would you mind making an introduction to them? I would love to meet them. I actually know a person that built a very successful business almost entirely based on that question. Simply every single time that he met someone, had created a good connection with them, he asked them, who's the most influential person you know? And when they said, do you mind introducing them to me? And then when he met them, he said the same thing. So imagine that you continuously get introduced to more and more and more and more influential people. This is super powerful. But there's another way to find out who are the leaders in a group, and that's to spot in a group who has like small clusters of people hanging around them. Could be 2 or 3, 4 people, and just notice the group dynamics. Who seems to be the person that people are listening to? Those would be the mini leaders, or could be big leaders. And once you get connected to the leaders and most influential people, you become one of those. Business networking tip number 42, take massive action, especially in the beginning. So when you decide to start building your network, I recommend hitting it quite hard. I don't want you to burn out and go completely crazy, but I also don't want you to just do networking once a month. There are several benefits of doing this. Like one, momentum feeds on itself. The quicker you do it, the more connections you're going to create, the more you're going to get excited, the more your belief goes up, and the more confident then you will become when you go out and talk to more people. And the more confident you'll be, the more your results you'll be, and it's an upwards spiral. But the thing is that you'll also learn the skills of the trade much faster when you compress the learning. Let's say you want to go out and do something, you learn something, and you practice every 6 months. I guarantee you, after 50 years, you'll have practiced 100 times, right? 2 times a year, over 50 years, that's 100 times. But you're probably not going to be very good at it. Now, if you practiced 100 times within a month, say, that's of course a little bit unrealistic with networking events, but just for the argument of this example, if you practice 100 times within a month, you would be really, really good. So the more you compress the learning, the less you actually have to do before your brain gets it and learns it. So if you want to work less and get more results, hit it hard. Also, not just about going to the networking events, but for example, practicing your pitch a lot of times. Don't just practice it in your head, by the way. Practice it over and over and over and over again, and practice it a lot of times in a short period of time. Business networking tip number 43, and that is to step outside of your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is your failure zone. Or if not the failure zone, it's at least, or at the very best, your stay stuck zone. The times in my life that I grew the fastest was when I challenged myself on a weekly basis to do something that I was scared of. And so interesting, because once you've done something for a few times, you might even think like, what was I scared of? That's how I feel about public speaking now and doing networking and meeting people. So how could you challenge yourself? Well, for example, at a networking event, how about that every single time you go to networking, you decide beforehand that you are going to approach the most intimidating person at that event. There could be massive value for you in doing this, because not only by going outside of your comfort zone, you stretch, you become more confident, but also because that intimidating person will probably be the most influential person in the room as well. And once you talk to them, everybody else in the room will seem like a breeze. Business networking tip number 44, don't switch your pitch too often. See, this is really crazy, and I understand why people do it, but it simply doesn't work. People will go to a networking event and then they will try 5 different pitches or try different versions of their pitch 5 times throughout the night. That simply doesn't work. They think they're just going to see, oh, did this pitch work? And did this one work? What worked best? But the reality is that you cannot possibly know what worked best if you operate this way, for several reasons. First of all, if you only do one pitch one way and another pitch another way, you will never gain the mastery and the confidence and the automated behavior that it takes to be really present and deliver it with power. You will start to speak with impact, and people will start to listen to you when you practice a pitch 100 times or 200 or 300 times. See, one of my biggest aha moments was when I discovered that it's not just about the words that you say, but it's really mostly about the delivery and delivering it with confidence and impact. And that confidence and impact will simply not come if you do one pitch here and one pitch there. No, it comes from practicing that pitch many, many, many times. So practice the same pitch and then go out and use it, let's say 20 times or 50 times. And then after that, you can do another pitch maybe 50 times. That's how you can really measure and find out what works best. So please don't switch your pitch too often. And that brings us to business networking tip number 45. And we actually kind of covered a little bit about it in 44, but it's to practice your pitch until you can recite it in your dreams. Practice it not until you can remember it, but until you cannot forget it. And why this is important, it is super, super important. Please listen to me now. First of all, when you go out and network, for almost everyone, it is outside of your comfort zone, a little bit outside of your comfort zone. At that moment where you go outside of your comfort zone, what happens is you actually become dumber. And I don't say this kind of jokingly, you will actually biologically become dumber, because what happens is that resources from your prefrontal cortex will go towards your limbic brain, your fight and flight brain. And so if you only practice your pitch a few times and you're suddenly in a situation where you're talking to a person that seems a little bit intimidating, that pitch is just going to be gone. You will not be able to remember it. I kid you not. Please take this to heart. So the moment you're nervous, your old programming takes over. And that's why you need to practice so many times, because if you practice it a couple hundred times, that is your old programming. Suddenly it's a program that actually sits in what's called the monkey brain, where it's literally just automatic behavior like driving or tying your shoelaces. So you'll be able to do that under pressure. And here's really an amazing thing that'll happen when you do this. You'll be able to do it automatically without thinking about it. And two things happen. First of all, you'll come across very natural and very confident. And number two, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to focus on it. And therefore, you can focus on them. You can be very present in the moment. You can focus on your delivery. You can focus on their body language and what is happening between the two of you. Practicing a pitch is so powerful, and it's so shocking how few people actually do it. And if they do, they practice it like, 3, 4, 5 times. But you need to practice it 50, 60, 80, 100 times or even more. This alone could be your next level up. So please take this advice to heart. So if you don't know how to construct a powerful pitch, make sure you look in the description to find a link to advanced training on this. Business networking tip number 46. Send them a real old-fashioned card. This is very powerful because the two things you must accomplish in the networking game, marketing and sales, is one, be noticed, and two, be remembered. And when you send them a real world card after you met them, that accomplishes both. You might have heard about a guy called Joe Girard. He's actually listed in the Guinness Book of Records as the best car salesman in the world. He personally sold more cars than some whole dealerships did. And he had the number one highest reorder rate in the whole industry. One of the things that was a key to his success is that he sent his customers a real card every single month. And it's not so much about what you say on the cards, it's more about that little extra gesture of doing something that almost nobody else does. You know, cards have already made a really good impression, but these days, they're even way more powerful because almost nobody does it. So it's a very easy way to stand out. Business networking tip number 47. Give them a gift. Now, you might think that you don't have the budget for this, but let me just explain something to you here. Let's say you go to a networking event. And so first of all, what does it cost in transport price to go to the event? What does the ticket cost? What do you pay for food while you're there or drinks? I would say on the very low end, we're talking about 30, 40 pounds, maybe way more. So if you identified a really good prospect or a really good connection, invest in them. You know, and you can buy really nice gifts for, let's say, 5 to 10 pounds. Don't let other people run away with them when 5 to 10 pounds could have made that extra huge difference. Now, one of the things that I do is to buy books for people. It leaves a super big impression. And if they read that book and get something out of it, they'll remember you and thank you for it. And also, maybe they will see that book many times throughout the years and remember you for it every single time. If you're in a real budget, what you could do is you can actually buy used books on Amazon that are practically as good as new. People will really not be able to see the difference. And these days, if you want to buy people a drink, that's typically what, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe more pounds, dollars. So for about the same price of a drink, you could give them something that leaves a way bigger impression and have longer lasting effect. If you wanted some more advanced gifting strategies, I recommend you read Giftology by John Ruhlin. Business networking tip number 48. Use a CRM. CRM is a customer relationship management program. There are tons of good ones out there, even some that are free up to a certain amount of connections. So just go online and search for CRM systems. And this is super important as you are scaling your network to keep details about them. For example, their birthdays, their kids, what they do for hobbies, their pets' birthdays. That's, by the way, is a great tip, is to send a card on their pet's birthday. It blows people away, by the way. Keep details like their greatest achievements. The more you get to know about them, the easier it is to create a deep connection and trust with them. It may sound a lot of extra work, but I guarantee you, instead of going around and trying to connect with 100 people and not get so many results from it because you're only connecting on a superficial level, connect with 25 people and go deep instead. I guarantee you, you're going to get more out of it. Business networking tip number 49, and that's to find similarities. We tend to like and trust people more that are like ourselves. And because of this, one of the quickest ways to create that trust is to find what you have in common. It could be anything, hobbies, places they lived. And interestingly, the more unusual things that you find that you share in common, the quicker the bonding will happen. And it's really kind of interesting and sad that people will spend a lot of time preparing to talk about themselves and their business when initially it's really about finding things to talk about them. So ask questions, dig deep, find that thing that you share in common. And I guarantee you, when it comes time to talk about business, they will listen to you way more. They will trust you way more. Business networking tip number 50. Start an online group like a Facebook group or LinkedIn group. It really is a fantastic way to keep on the bonding and the relationship building that you have experienced when you go to a networking event. Remember, the more ways you find to keep in connection with people and to deliver value for them, the quicker the trust will happen. And of course, if you invite them into your group where they get to connect with other people, that is also a way for you to deliver value for them. So that was the first 50 tips, but there's 50 more and some of them even more powerful. If they're already out, you'll find them right here. And if not, make sure you subscribe because they'll be out soon and you do not want to miss them. That's it for now. See you in the next video.